So, 8 months later, yeah, so part 1, I'm going to try not say so much this time. We'll see how it goes. I'm still using the same pulp I used, I blended up 8 months ago. I had to rinse it last night because it was kind of rank. Apron. Today's t-shirt that is being covered up is a robot doing yoga. And it's by Andrew Duff, local artist. Dino Squid. So today will involve actually pulling the sheets of paper, which is actually putting the pulp to a big bucket of water, and then screen involved. I'll show you what's involved. Bucket, yogurt container, felts, towels, and of course, the pulp. You want to lay out some towels on your working surface because it gets very wet and messy, and it's just nice to have a lot of things that absorb water so it doesn't get as far as it could. So for pulling sheets, you build what is called a post, and a post is basically just your layers and layers of the pieces of paper that you've pulled so that you can put it in a press and squeeze out all the water so it's easier to dry and it gets flatter. You build a post on a board. This is kind of a shitty board, but it'll do, it's fine. You press it between 2 boards of about equal size that will fit inside your press. If you have a press, or if you have, there's different ways you can kind of make your own pressing device. And they're on the internet. On top of the bottom board goes a nice big towel to absorb a lot of the water that's going to be squeezed into it. Then some really absorbent felts. These are actually, I think, made out of, not actual felt, like wool, which is felt, but a synthetic kind, but they're really absorbent and great. I got these, I think, at Canadian Tire, and if you don't live in Canada, you don't have Canadian Tire. Oh, you don't get the Canadian Tire money, and it's amazing. A lot of water being used, obviously. So your tub of water should only be about half full. You don't want too much water because you're going to be displacing it with your pulp and also your screen, so you don't want it to slop everywhere. That's not a good thing. This is what my setup looks like. This is my bucket full of water. This is the paper slurry that I made all those months ago that is rinsed and has sizing in it and cold. Yogurt container. Felts that have been dampened. You don't want them soaking wet, but you don't want them bone dry. Screen, beginning of the post. Now the fun begins. Yogurt container. This is going to be used to scoop up your slurry and add to your big bucket of water. You start with... This is the problem with doing an instructional video with paper making, because it tends to be a feel kind of thing. I like to start with my pulp quite thick, and then I start pulling kind of thick sheets, and then I get it down, and then I figure out what is the best thinness of sheet that I want, the ideal while I'm pulling it, and then I just keep adding pulp as I use the pulp for the sheets. I keep adding more slurry to my pulp to bring it back up to that level. So that's what you can do as well. If you don't know what kind of thickness of paper or pulling the sheets that you want, put in a lot of your slurry to make a thick pulp, and then start pulling thick sheets, and as you pull sheets and the water remains and the pulp comes out, you'll get less pulp and you'll get thinner sheets, and that's how you can maybe decide how thick you want your paper. So you take a felt, which is just, I'm just using old sheets, cotton sheets, white sheets. It's been ripped up to an appropriate size. So you've got the beginning of a post to absorb a lot of the water. You're going to put one felt down that's damp. You want to try and keep everything really centered. This is a screen that I'm going to be using. This was once upon a time built by my mother, I think. My mom used to do a lot of paper making workshops when I was a kid, and that's when my love of paper began, when I was maybe 4 or 5. These are called a mold and a decal. Why do I always forget which one's which? Pretty sure this is the decal and this is the mold because it shapes it. I could be wrong. I'm probably wrong. Sometimes you're wrong in life, and that's okay. Either way, you've got a screen and you've got a shaping. This is what your size your paper is going to be. You put this into the bucket. You want a screen and then your mold on top. And you put it in vertically and bring it through the water horizontally. And you pull up through all your pulp and all your water. The water strains away. The pulp remains on the screen in this nice square paper shape. You open up once it's you've drained a bit of the water, and so the pulp isn't going to slide around because it's still full of water. You kind of go by a corner, let it all drain out one corner. You lift it up. The first few are kind of the hardest, because that's just how it goes, right? Before you build a post, it gets easier with a post because you have a bit of momentum to kind of stick the paper onto the other felts. Face down, flick it if you need to, get a sponge and sponge away some of the water, press some water. Sometimes either method works, oddly enough, taking away water, adding more water to release the fibers from the screen, because sometimes the fibers like to stay on the screen. And then you pull it away, and then you put down another felt on top, and you do it over and over and over again. So let's do it. Oh, and I like to stir every time before I put in my my screen. I stir up the pulp. That way it's evenly spaced, and I can get a good, even sheet. It's a piece of paper! Don't always hold it up like this, because it could fall off, and that's a disaster. Be careful with your paper. This is a nice thick sheet, so I wasn't too scared about it. So try and line up your screen and your paper with the previous sheet. Luckily I've got these basically see-through, so I can see where the previous sheet was, and I can kind of line it up. That way you have a nice, strong, even post. If you pull a sheet of paper and you don't like it, or if there's spots, or you missed a bit, or it's not good, or even when you put it, you make a mistake putting it on your felt, on your felt, don't worry about it. You can put the pulp back into your basin of water. You can, if you screw up on the screen, you just let the screen face down, get rid of all the pulp, mix it back in. It hasn't been compressed, and it hasn't through the press, and it hasn't dried, so it's still, the fibers they're stuck together, but they're not locked together. So just put them back in the water, you're fine. The same with on the sheet. If it folds, sometimes when it's coming off the screen, it folds weird, or you lift away the screen and it hasn't come off yet, and then as you lift it away, it just crumples onto your felt. Happens so many times. Then that's fine. Just put it back in with water, pull another sheet. You're good to go. So, speaking of good to go, I'm gonna do this over and over again, and maybe time elapse. We'll see how this goes. It might be really boring, unless you really like to watch me. What? Yeah. to come to a part where you have no more slurry. All of your pulp is now in your basin, and it's running too thin. So what you want to do is sieve. Take buckets. Take your yogurt container and start to drain out your pulp that's in your basin into the sieve, and remove some of the water from the basin. Put it back into your bucket. Then just take the pulp that you strained out, put it back into your basin, and that way you have less water to pulp ratio. Did I do that right? I did that right. So and then keep kind of doing that until you don't have enough water in the basin to actually pull your screen through. Then usually what I do is I just start to pour, just so I use all of it, is I take the yogurt container, good old yogurt container, and just start pouring using the screen basically as your sieve, and pouring the pulp right onto the screen, just whatever remains. You might not have an even sheet, but at least you use up all the pulp and you don't have to get rid of it and waste any pulp. So let's do that. Once you're finished, your pulp has completely been exhausted. There's still going to be, even though you can't keep pulling sheets, there's still going to be paper, like pulp, in that water. And it's very important that you don't put that down your drain, because it'll dry and cake and clog up your drains. So just avoid that. A really easy way to avoid that are like drain trap things. You just put in the drain, strain. You gotta have two levels of kind of straining, so make sure you strain all of your old pulp water through your sieve before putting it down your drain, the water down your drain, but also have these just in case you miss anything, just in case there's extra, just in case. Hopefully I didn't say as many times this time. I probably did.